More than just a grid-based tool, Smartsheet excels in planning, tracking, and reporting. A solid grasp of its user interface and essential functionalities, including baselines and critical paths, is crucial for effective usage. GANTT View is an effective tool for visualizing your project timeline in Smartsheet. It provides a clear representation of tasks, timelines, dependencies, and progress. To utilize GANTT View, make sure your sheet includes at least 2 date columns, a start date and an end date. If any dates are missing, those tasks won't have a corresponding bar, so it's essential to enter dates in both columns before using this feature. We'll explore the key roles of GANTT View step by step, starting with visualizing the project timeline, tracking progress, managing task dependencies, highlighting the critical path, supporting baseline comparison. The right section of the GANTT View shows the project timeline. The Gantt chart has 4 timeline zoom levels. This view allows zooming in or out, showing how the tasks spread out when viewed in quarters, months, weeks, and days. By now, you must have got the idea that on the selection of GANTT View, the chart appears to the right of your columns. There is also a divider that separates the grid columns from the Gantt chart. You can widen the display of either section by hovering over the divider and dragging the divider to the right or left. Let's dive deeper into the Gantt chart features. Managing dependencies in the Gantt view in Smartsheet is an essential part of effective project scheduling. Dependencies link tasks together, ensuring that they are completed in the correct order. To fully grasp this feature, ensure your sheet is free from any existing columns such as percentage complete, predecessors, or duration. This will enhance your understanding and experience. Here's a step-by-step guide for managing dependencies in Smartsheet's Gantt view. 1. Click on the project settings gear icon in the Gantt chart. Check the box for dependencies enabled. 3. Configure additional settings such as predecessors, duration, and working days. By default, weekdays are set as working days, with a duration of 8 hours each day. 4. Also, the percentage completion of tasks is crucial information to display. To include this, ensure you add the percentage complete option from the percentage complete column. To ensure that the percentage column is visible in your sheet, first add the column if it's not already there. Before adding the percentage column, make sure to apply the changes made after enabling the dependencies. Once you navigate back to the Gantt view, you should see the newly added predecessors and duration columns. We'll revisit this shortly, but first, let's add the percentage column to our sheet. Once the percentage column is included, you can format the values by selecting the column header at the top and clicking the % icon in the toolbar. After formatting, head back to the Edit Project settings. You should now be able to see the percentage column in the Options drop-down menu. Select it and click OK to apply the changes. Adding the percentage column is significant for 2 key reasons. First, Smartsheet automatically calculates the % complete for parent rows based on the duration and percentage complete values of their child rows. This means when you enter values for the child tasks, the parent's completion percentage updates automatically. Second, this column creates a visual percentage complete indicator within the taskbars on the Gantt chart. This allows for quick insights into project progress. For instance, when the work done percentage for a task is increased, the visual indicator on the taskbar reflects this change in real time, providing an intuitive way to track progress. This setup will help you effectively monitor and manage your project's progress and timelines. Our next section is crucial when it comes to defining dependencies and to keep track of the critical path. As you might recall, the predecessors and duration columns were added when the dependencies were enabled. To ensure everything is organized correctly, drag a few columns to the right side of the duration column since it is calculated based on dates. This way, you can maintain a clear view of your project timeline and ensure all necessary information is easily accessible. When the duration column is added from the project settings section by selecting the Dependencies Enabled checkbox, it automatically calculates the duration based on the start and end dates while excluding weekends. If any dates are missing in the Smartsheet, entering values in the duration and predecessor columns will trigger the automatic entry of the start and end dates. These dates will be determined based on the completion date of the dependent task and the number of days required to complete the current task. This makes it easier to manage timelines and ensure that everything stays on track. To illustrate this feature, consider a scenario where the previous task concludes on 12/25/24. If you designate the preceding task, located in row 10, as a predecessor and assign a duration of 4D, the start date for this task will be set to 12/26/24. The task will then account for 4 business days, resulting in an end date of 12/31/24. To verify this, you can access the calendar feature, which will demonstrate that weekends, Saturdays and Sundays, are omitted from the calculation of business days. It's important to note that adjustments made in individual tasks can influence the overall timelines of parent items within your project hierarchy. Always keep in mind that changes can have a cascading effect on project schedules. Now, we just saw that adding a predecessor drives a task's start or end date, and you can change it manually by clicking the cell and selecting a new date. Doing so overrides the association with the predecessor and removes the value from the row. Changing the dates will prompt you with the removal of the predecessor dependency, and upon approving it, this will result in the deletion of the predecessor. Duration for parent tasks can never be altered. It gives a prompt that this row has subtasks and cannot be edited directly. Let's take one more example where a user story is dependent on the previous one, and when the predecessor is added, then it impacts its dependent task schedule. If a parent row has a predecessor value listed, this dependency relationship drives the start dates for each child row. For example, if row number 7, which is a parent task, and it becomes dependent on row number 6, then the schedule of row number 7, its child tasks, gets updated. One can see all the rows are updated based on the parent start and end date. The start date of row number 7 will be the next business day of the completion date of row 6. To revert the changes, undo them, or press Ctrl and Z keys. If you don't want these changes to be done automatically, then navigate to the project settings screen and disable the dependencies. Now, if you add a predecessor in the parent row, it will not impact the child rows. To revert the changes on the project settings screen, first ensure that you undo any previous modifications on the GANTT View screen. Then, enable the Dependencies checkbox. When you select it, a prompt will appear stating that a column named Predecessors exists on your sheet. Confirm by selecting Yes. After that, a similar prompt will appear for the duration column. Again, select Yes. Finally, click on OK on the project screen to save these settings. The GANTT View has an important feature known as the critical path, which represents the longest sequence of dependent tasks from the start to the finish of a project. In the Gantt chart, all tasks and milestones included in the critical path are highlighted in red. To view the critical path, make sure the Enable Dependencies option is checked in the project settings. Without this, the feature will not function. When you return to the Gantt view, hover over the critical path icon to see a tooltip that indicates whether to show or hide the critical path. By selecting Show Critical Path, any tasks with end dates that match the project's completion date will be marked in red. For instance, if a task's end date is 4/4/2025 and that is also the project's end date, it will appear highlighted. It's essential to note that only the child rows in the critical path are marked red. Their parent rows will remain unchanged. Tasks in a project typically depend on one another, which influences the critical path. For example, if a task in row 25 relies on a task in row 22. The critical path can be established in two ways. One, by entering the predecessor's row number 22 in the predecessor's column of row 25, the task will become critical. Two, alternatively, delete the previous entry in the predecessor's column, then click and drag the taskbar of row 22 toward the critical path. This will also make it critical, and the predecessor's value will be populated automatically. Additionally, while you can create dependencies among tasks, not all will necessarily fall on the critical path. For example, if task number 16 depends on task number 14, those tasks won't appear in red if they aren't on the critical path. However, if both tasks are linked, the dates for task number 16 will adjust automatically, as discussed in our previous coverage of the Gantt view. Baselines. In simple terms, a baseline tracks the difference between the original schedule and the schedule changes over time. In this scenario, if we change the value of start or end dates, it impacts the variance. Let's see how this baseline is set for a project. Currently, there are no baseline columns, and variance exists in this sheet. The baseline is set for the project by clicking the baseline icon, which brings up a baseline window with the project's start and end date values. By default, the actual and baseline dates are set to the same. After clicking OK, baseline start, baseline finish, and variance columns are added to the sheet. It's helpful to place these baseline columns next to the start date and end date to understand how changes in dates affect the project's variance. To clarify with a few examples, when you change the actual end date of any task, the variance for that task will fluctuate either positively or negatively, depending on whether the task finishes early or late. After clicking the baseline's icon, the baseline window will show no changes in the dates, and the variance status will remain on schedule. Now let's explore changing the dates of tasks on the critical path. Previously, we discussed the critical path in detail. If you select a task on this path and adjust its start or end dates, say, by moving the start date ahead by 2 days, it will automatically shift the end date of that task by 2 days as well, and will also affect the dependent tasks along the current critical path. Click OK on the prompt, as we have already seen earlier, while working on the critical path. If we try to make date changes on the critical path, it impacts the schedule and also removes the dependency value from the predecessor's column, as is happening in this scenario. You can see that the highlighted values for critical path dependency and predecessors have disappeared from the sheet. After clicking the baseline's icon again, you'll notice that the variance status indicates being days behind by 2 days. Just now, we saw that there are changes in the actual schedule of the project, or there could be additions of new tasks. One can always reset the new baselines. This action resets the variances to 0 and aligns the baseline columns with the current values from the start and end date columns. As a result, it generates a new snapshot of the project timelines, reflecting that the variance is on schedule. In the following sections, we will explore powerful features such as forms, conditional formatting, formulas, sharing, and more. Remember to like and subscribe. For details on the previous modules, please refer to the description link.